Hey guys, Zack here, and this is my review of Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated. Okay, so if you guys don't know what Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated is, it is a incarnation of the Scooby-Doo franchise that I have never seen. And long story short, it came out in the 2010s and was apparently one of those shows that came out in an era when Cartoon Network shows were a lot better than they had any right to be. I think also in the mix was Looney Tunes Show, Adventure Time, and a couple others. But yeah, Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated has a more serious tone to it, and is kind of a good series for both younger fans and older fans alike. So yeah, it is a very interesting premise, and also kind of sort of serves as a bit of a soft reboot for the series as a whole, but which is interesting. But yeah, long story short, I had never actually seen Mystery Incorporated prior to doing this, and I kind of set up the fact that I might do it in the future because I kind of ended Courage Month on a bit of an interesting note. You guys may have noticed that that the film was a crossover with Scooby-Doo. It's almost as if I planned this from the beginning. But in any case, this first episode is actually interesting in that it actually sets up the premise and a lot of the peripheral characters that will be showing up throughout the series. But yeah, this episode does kind of open up with the Mystery Inc. gang having solved yet another mystery, and what we find out is that the Mystery Inc. gang isn't well liked. As we quickly find out, the town sheriff, Sheriff Stone, who is voiced by Patrick Warburton because of course, he immediately arrests them for interfering with police business and kind of locks them up for a bit while he goes to call their parents. Pointing out that he's tired of them actually interfering with their police business and actually just kind of doing their thing and just solving mysteries, which he doesn't really care for all that much because it could put them in serious danger, and also he points out that it's kind of the police's job to investigate things, so for varying reasons he doesn't like them. In any case, he does proceed to actually call all of their parents, and they come to go pick them up. And even emphasizing that Fred's dad, who we do later meet, Fred Jones Sr., is the mayor of their new town that they live in, Crystal Cove. They normally live in Coolsville, USA, but for this one they decided to put them in the town of Crystal Cove, which is described on its sign as the most hauntedest place on Earth. Which isn't grammatically correct at all, but in any case, the episode then continues onward by showing each of the Mystery Inc. gang members actually interacting with their parents. First and foremost, we actually meet Velma properly, who actually helps her parents run their museum of spooks in the center of Crystal Cove, and the episode actually starts off with her giving a guided tour to a group of tourists who are coming to actually see the museum. And what's interesting here is that in addition to actually finding out a bit more history about the town, such as how there was several Spanish groups who tried to settle Crystal Cove and disappeared until the official founding family actually changed the name, which seemed to have held up the curse for a while, but then the family themselves disappeared and were never heard from again. So yeah, Velma just points all of this out with a very nonchalant expression on her face, like yeah, I'm just going through the motions very much. That's basically what's going on here. She's just completely zoned out. She doesn't really care. She doesn't really care about the whole mystery solving about the whole supernatural thing, and we do find out why, because then we actually get a look into what kind of things are actually in the museum that her parents run, and what we actually wind up finding out is that this is a universe where all of the classic mysteries from the original series have already been solved. So yeah, you have characters from all from throughout the original series, and it's just a little fun who's who of who the gang has caught over the years. There's actually even a cameo from the initial villain from the original live action movie. I forget the name of the actual villain, but it's the ghost guy. That guy. He shows up as a cameo in this episode, and yeah, it's just an interesting scene because it just shows off all the classic villains from Scooby-Doo. Where are you? And it's implied that they were all eventually caught and unmasked. And Velma doesn't even shy away from this, pointing out that she isn't really all too enthusiastic about any of them because they're all fake. As she points out, they're all fake, and they were all unmasked. And for that reason, she's very skeptical about the fact that there are any actual supernatural things going on. It's at this point where we actually formally meet her parents, and they proceed to cover her mouth and end the tour immediately, and then yell at her proceed to yell at her for almost driving off their business. And even point out that she's literally just she's very much just trying to point out the fact that she knows that the mysteries are fake, and usually there aren't any actual supernatural creatures. So yeah, for that reason, her parents are a little bit annoyed at her, pointing out that they're just a checkered past from an otherwise history of supernatural things, but Velma just points out that solving mysteries with Mystery Inc. has actually caused her to kind of open her eyes and realize that for more often than not, the creatures aren't actually supernatural or pose a real threat. They're just disgruntled guys who are trying to make a quick buck. And long story short, there's a whole but that is very much a thing. Even Charlie, the robot, the evil robot from the original series, he was a robot made because the guy thought it would be cheaper to just hire a robot to hire everything, and it wound up backfiring on him. So yeah, that's why Charlie the robot was rampaging through his debut episode. But yeah, it is. But in any case, it also then proceeds to actually cut to Fred and his dad talking with each other, and what we find out is that Fred Jones Sr. He's not particularly happy with his son solving mysteries either. But what we find out is that each of the parents have a different reason for objecting to the kids actually going off to solve mysteries. Pointing out that in Fred's case, his dad points out that he's the mayor's son and needs to actually look a bit more dignified and a bit more respectful. Which Fred is very much against, since he's very much this incarnation of Fred is set up to be a guy who loves his traps. He loves setting up such elaborate traps to actually go forward and catch creatures. And he wants to actually know more about and he actually likes to know more about how to actually design and engineer traps, and working with Mystery Inc. actually helps him accomplish that, much to his dad's chagrin. Meanwhile, as we find out, Shaggy and Scooby are not only classic loser slackers like they are, although they do serve. Although the animated movie Scoob, I don't think I ever reviewed Scoob now that I think about it, but the animated movie Scoob that came out recently-ish does kind of imply what Shaggy and Scooby's role in Mystery Inc. are, in that they're the glue that holds the whole thing together. They don't really contribute to the mystery solving all that much, but they're the guys who provide lunch. They're the guys who provide morale. And long story short, they're just in general the people who keep Mystery Inc. from falling apart. So yeah, in general, they're probably the most important members of the team in that regard, because without them, Mystery Inc. probably wouldn't exist. But in any case, his parents are actually revealed to not particularly care for the whole Shaggy and Scooby hanging out and going after dangerous creatures thing, and his mom is very blunt. They want him to get new friends. So but Shaggy merely points out that they actually do hightail it at the first sign of danger and aren't actually in any real danger. And usually they kind of go to either get help or just kind of hide from the monster so that the rest of the gang can actually maybe try and deal with it, and maybe lower the monster into a trap. So, long story short, that is usually what their role is in any of the mysteries they solve. But and finally, we actually find out that Daphne's parents, they don't approve of her relationship with Mystery Inc. Mainly, and this has been a thing with her character, that she wants to be both a model and a detective, and in this incarnation, her parents believe she can't actually do both. yeah, her character is very much characterized by the fact that she wants to be both. She wants to be both a famous model and a detective, and her parents don't believe she can do both because they think that the mystery solving aspect of that is actually a waste of time. And her mom is even more blunt about the fact that she's not particularly well. Long story short, she believes that Fred is also a bad influence on her because obviously, and this is a thing that has been applied for a while, but is explicitly brought up here in this incarnation of the series. That Daphne has a bit of a crush on Fred. And the way she talks about him in the scene is very much one of those love-struck things where she just kind of points out that he's a very different kind of person, and that according to Daphne, he's a genius, and he's one of those people who likes to see how things work, and subsequently create traps so that he can trap those things to see how they work. So she very much thinks of Fred as a bit of a genius, and but in any case, this conversation is cut off when the rest of Mystery Inc. actually comes to get her in the Mystery Machine. So she kisses her parents goodbye and then proceeds to leave. And also in the process, they remark that they wish she would be more successful like her older sisters. And we find out that apparently Mrs. Blake gave birth to 4 quadruplets at some point. I don't know how that works, but yeah, apparently she gave birth to 4 quadruplets, and they're all older than Daphne. So Daphne apparently has several older siblings in this incarnation, and they're all older, and they're all quadruplets, which is interesting. But in any case, they all proceed to actually get into the Mystery Machine, where we actually find out a bit more about each of the relationships between some of the different characters. As we find out, Fred is, while Daphne very much has a crush on Fred is a little bit, he's a little bit dismissive of it and doesn't seem to realize that she has a crush on him. So he's kind of oblivious to that whole thing, much to Daphne's chagrin. And as we also find out, Velma and Shaggy are dating in this incarnation. As we find out, Shaggy was actually wind up talking with Velma, and now they're actually dating in this incarnation. That's been a thing they've done before, but it's more explicit here. They're very much dating, and they're trying to make the relationship work. But as we find out, the reason their relationship isn't really public yet is apparently Shaggy doesn't want it to be public knowledge yet until he decides to break the news himself, with Velma pointing out that Fred and Daphne probably won't care. But as we find out, the main linchpin in the fact that Shaggy hasn't gone public with it yet is Scooby. As we find out, Shaggy is very worried about Scooby actually approving of the relationship and letting them date, because they're best friends, and he's not entirely sure how they would take it. So it's at this point, it's around this point where Velma decides that they should probably tell him at some point. Meanwhile, in the background of this, there's actually a group of construction workers who are currently working on the sewer. And while they're working, and one of the guys is actually leaning up against the wall to take his lunch break. His breakfast break, I think, because it's the middle of the morning and they're on their way to school. The wall behind him unwittingly collapses, and he starts to realize that. Well, long story short, the foreman realizes that his underlings actually remark that they must have fallen into the sewer, but they merely remark that there's only one. But the foreman merely remarks that there's only one sewer and they're in it. So they decide to actually, and he then proceeds to remark that they're actually in the cave systems under Crystal Cove, which is what the town is apparently known for. One of the old there's an old cove underneath Crystal Cove. Go figure. But in any case, they proceed to go and investigate, and eventually come across some toxic barrels with a toxic symbol on it. So, and the foreman, despite pointing out that they're obviously toxic barrels with toxic waste on them, decides to open them up once they hear something banging around inside, pointing out that it could mess up their schedule, and it's better to deal with it now than have to worry about it later. So they decide. So despite despite pointing out why it's a bad idea, they decide to open the barrel anyway and are immediately attacked by a monster that climbs out of it. We don't actually see the monster until much later, but they do wind up getting attacked. And this actually winds up happening as Velma is about to tell Scooby that she and Shaggy are in a relationship when suddenly something bursts out of the sewer, and Daphne immediately closes the window, and the monster is unable to actually get to them. And realizing it can't actually attack them, it proceeds to actually wander off. At which point the gang proceeds to wonder what exactly is going on and what that thing actually was. But Fred merely remarks that it actually is just a classic mystery and decides that that's actually a little bit more important than school, and decides to actually lead the gang into the sewer, where they actually wind up finding the cave system with the toxic barrels, and Daphne discovers a locket in the shape of a magnifying glass, and is a little bit curious because she doesn't exactly know who it belongs to, but wonders if it actually is indeed a clue, and Fred merely compliments her on the find, which she kind of takes as a sign that he likes her, but he immediately walks away to help investigate the toxic barrels with the rest of the gang, which annoys her a little bit, and she winds up just talking to herself because without realizing it, which is kind of funny. But in any case, immediately after that, they eventually wind up finding what happened to the construction crew that found the barrels initially, and discover that they've actually been cocooned to the ceiling of the cove, and immediately call the cops. So yeah, they immediately call the cops, and Sheriff Stone shows up with an ambulance to actually haul all the bodies away, but and then proceeds to yell at them to stop sticking their nose in people's business, in police business, pointing out that this time around somebody got cocooned, and he points out that that's a little bit dangerous, and kind of suspects that the gang had something to do with it, even though Shaggy immediately points out the problem with that, which is that they found him like that, so obviously it's not a problem. And but in any case, the sheriff merely points out that they really should keep their noses clean again, and proceeds to actually walk up to his car, pointing out that they're about to scare off their newest tourist attraction, which it's implied that Crystal Cove's police department just does not care about the monster in the slightest. They are just like, hey, this is a new thing we can use to actually bring people to our town. Let's use this thing to actually lure people in. But it's at this point where Fred actually decides to actually go and talk to Sheriff Stone and actually see if he can reason with him, while the rest of the gang actually just kind of hangs out and waits for him, pointing out that Fred, and with Daphne pointing out that Fred could easily smooth things over, and does trust him to actually work things out. Instead, Fred just straight up steals the body. So yeah, this is just a really funny thing that happens in the episode. But Fred leaves and immediately comes back with one of the cocoon bodies tucked under his arm, remarking that Sheriff Stone didn't seem like he was in the talking mood, so he just wound up stealing it and throwing it in the back of the mystery machine, with Velma just kind of complimenting him on how sick that is, and they then proceed to get into the mystery machine and drive off, with Fred pointing out that they actually have somebody they can actually talk to that actually analyze the body and see if they can actually figure out what's causing them to become incapacitated and cocooned. So it's at this point where we're actually introduced to the school science teacher, Emmanuel Ruffalo, who runs the science department at the school, and he takes his job very seriously. Case in point, he asks his entire class what photosynthesis is, and they all raise their hand. At which point he merely tells them to not refer to it as plant farts, at which point they all put their hand down, which annoys him. So he proceeds to actually go into the lesson about how photosynthesis works. At which point Mr. Ink actually winds up barging into his classroom and abruptly puts an end to the class, because obviously for reasons they actually long story short, there's just a mummified body in their classroom. Would you stay if you saw that? But in any case, Professor Ruffalo is annoyed at them for actually bringing a body into his classroom, but decides to actually analyze it anyway because he's fascinated by it as well, and after analyzing the cocoon a little bit, he points out that it seems like the person is actually kept in a bit of a stasis, and points out that they seem to be dehydrated as a result of that, and is curious as to what that cocoon is actually made out of, but and remarks that he'll actually need to make more to conduct a more thorough investigation after hours. But in the meantime, tells them that they should just go about their day, and he'll let them know what he finds. So they then proceed to go. So then Mystery Inc. then proceeds to go through their school day, and at the end of the school day, they decide to actually stop off at Friedmeier's, I think. But yeah, they stop off at this frozen yogurt shop run by the guy who runs it, Franklin Frosmeyer, who's kind of a clown first and foremost, and I mean an actual clown, but he runs his own frozen yogurt shop. It's unclear, they even remark that they're unsure what the actual product actually is. Just that it's some sort of frozen treat, but they then proceed to bring it's actually revealed that it was actually Shaggy and Scooby's request to actually bring them there, since they actually like the place, and point out that it is actually a very delicious after school treat. But in any case, after as they're actually eating and finishing up, they wonder if Professor Ruffalo will actually find anything, and are still a little bit curious as to what the cocoon is. But it's at this point where Scooby actually runs in to actually eat more Frosmeyers. I don't think I've actually gotten his name right once, but at which point once he believes they're alone, Velma asks Shaggy if there's anything they could investigate together, and proceeds to actually try and hold his hand, but Shaggy immediately just runs into the shop as well to actually figure out if there is indeed any more Frosmeyers, but which annoys Velma, and friend Daphne are very subtle about the fact that they've picked up on the fact that there's something happening between Shaggy and Velma, but Velma just curtly denies it and proceeds to walk off, which conveniently results in Daphne and Fred being alone, and Daphne isn't subtle about that. She remarks that she would very much like to talk about the locket that she found, and even kind of implies that she wants it to be a date, but Fred merely points out that it isn't real, that she normally isn't very interested in girly stuff, and points out that that's why they're such good friends. At which point he decides to actually drop her off with her again just being annoyed that he seems to have completely missed her cues entirely, and they proceed to get into the mystery machine, and Fred drives her home. At which point it's revealed that the sludge monster has actually washed them from the sewer, and angrily glares at them as they drive off. But in any case, later that night, Professor Ruffalo is actually still investigating the cocoon, and decides to actually take a break because he's been working all day to try and figure it out. But it's late at night, so obviously that's a problem. But in any case, they then proceed. But in any case, as he's investigating, he actually winds up hearing a strange noise and proceeds to walk out to investigate it. What he actually winds up finding is a janitor, which he decides is normal enough and proceeds to go back to his research, but then Professor Ruffalo actually lets out a scream, and the janitor goes in to investigate to discover Professor Ruffalo has actually been cocooned to the ceiling, and is presumably been attacked by the slime monster. So yeah, it's definitely a little bit interesting that the slime monster actually winds up attacking Professor Ruffalo, because obviously Professor Ruffalo is investigating the cocoon, so obviously the slime monster needs him gone, and this kind of further implies that the creature is actually a man in a mask. If it's sentient enough to figure out that somebody is investigating it, and decides to stop the investigation in its tracks. But in any case, the next morning, the rest of Mystery Inc. actually wind up going to see Angel Dynamite, who is revealed to be an old friend of the group, and actually runs the Crystal Cove radio station. With her remarking that apparently Fred came into her shop to actually crash, because he found out what happened to Professor Ruffalo, and is kind of depressed about it. So they proceed to come into the station and see Fred slumped over a gramophone. He's just slumped over a turntable and is completely out of it. So he doesn't really know what to do, because according to himself, he was indeed the one who stole the cocoon, which ultimately resulted in Professor Ruffalo getting attacked. But but Velma actually just kind of reassures him, pointing out that they all decided to steal the cocoon together. With Shaggy trying to correct her and being shut up, and deciding to actually just go with it. And Velma even remarks that they actually brought some samples from the cocoon to actually investigate, pointing out that they could be helpful to the investigation, only to discover to her horror that Scooby is currently eating it. And obviously Angel Dynamite is very much up front about the point that obviously he's eaten something radioactive, and it's very possible he may mutate. So she immediately points out that if something happens to him, she's putting the dog down, which is kind of funny. But in any case, Scooby merely remarks that it's actually Frostmeyer's, and that's fine. And while nobody actually understands, it's eventually Shaggy who actually goes to investigate and actually winds up tasting it, which again freaks out the gang. But then he points out that it is indeed completely safe to eat, and it is indeed Frostmeyer's. So the rest of the gang and Angel actually wind up taking a lick of it as well, and discover that Shaggy and Scooby are completely right, and that it is indeed their frozen treat from their favorite yogurt shop. So they decide to actually investigate a little bit further, since they point out that they don't actually know much about Franklin Frostmeyer. And decide to actually look into him a little more, and discover that Franklin Frostmeyer, at least according to Mystery Inc., at least according to the documents they could find, apparently moved to Crystal Cove 2 months ago, and beyond that, they have nothing on him. So they decide to point out that there seems to be something a little bit strange going on at Frostmeyer's, and decides to actually go and investigate, with Shaggy actually suggesting that they disguise Daphne and Velma to work as employees in the shop, pointing out that the girls would actually be perfect for an infiltration mission. Instead, Shaggy and Scooby wind up going in a disguise, because Daphne and Velma actually wind up refusing. So yeah, they wind up getting a cover job at Frostmeyer's, and later that night, Franklin Frostmeyer tells them to lock up, and proceeds to walk off and leave. At which point the rest of Mystery Inc. gang joins them in the building, and actually start investigating the Frostmeyer's facility to actually figure out if they could actually find something related to the slime monster. And eventually Daphne does wind up stumbling across a private storage room, which she realizes she can't actually unlock herself, and immediately goes to actually go find the key. Meanwhile, Scooby and Shaggy, who are currently raiding the freezer, decide to actually go and investigate the storage as well, to actually see what's in there. And Scooby immediately picks it with his claw once Daphne leaves, and proceeds to get the door open. But when they do, they're actually met face to face with a slime monster for the first time, who immediately tries to attack them. And obviously Shaggy and Scooby very much run off, and Velma and Daphne actually then proceeds to come back and investigate, but then proceeds to actually get stuck in the storage room, and proceeds hollering for somebody to actually let her out. So, and yeah, this is something I haven't actually brought up about Daphne's character, but or at least I haven't brought it up yet, but and I don't think I have ever had the opportunity to bring it up, because I haven't covered Scooby-Doo before. But Daphne, throughout various all the different incarnations of the series, and this was a lot more obvious in the original cartoon, but Daphne, his nickname is Danger Pro Daphne because very early on in the series incarnations, she was very much the damsel in distress character, and often was the one who got kidnapped, locked in a room, and etc., and usually relied on the gang to come and find her. And she has slowly become more independent as the series has gone on, but there are still occasions where stuff like this happens, where she winds up getting locked in a room and getting stuck and unable to free herself. So yeah, and they've even actually brought it up in some of the direct-to-DVD sequels. So so it is still very much a part of her character. But in any case, Fred and Velma immediately come to her rescue, only for Shaggy and Scooby to come running in, because they're currently being chased by the slime monster, or at least they think they are. And proceed to actually accidentally knock to land on top of Daphne and send her flying deeper into the closet. With Velma merely asking if the two of them are mental, and proceeding to point out if they're actually insane. But they merely tell them what they saw, which is that they were actually being chased throughout the building by the slime monster. And Fred and Velma obviously don't see the slime monster because it seems to have disappeared on them, so they don't really understand where the slime monster actually could be. But it was at this point where they noticed that Daphne is actually missing, and after Daphne actually hollers to them, they discover why she's missing. As it turns out, there's a hole in the back of the storage room, and it goes into the cave that they were investigating earlier. So they proceed to climb down into it and discover that 20 feet, that about 20 meters or so from where the hole actually is in the bottom of Frostmire's, is another hole that seems to lead directly into the Crystal Cove bank. So they quickly put two together and quickly realize that Frostmire is most likely trying to rob the bank to actually get at the money. And it's at this point where they actually have everything they need to actually make a trap and capture the monster, and then proceed to get ready to do exactly that and set up a trap in the cave to actually lure the monster into. So at which point the slime monster proceeds to wander down into the cave, and then each of the members of Mystery Inc. actually take turns actually luring it into the trap. With Daphne actually leading the monster directly into the trap by running away from it. And it does fling some of its quote unquote slime at her, which she does wind up slipping on. At which point, she winds up falling down and actually almost gets cornered by the slime monster. At which point the Mystery Inc. puts the finishing touches on Fred's trap, which is revealed to be a giant Rube Goldberg machine. Decide to eventually drop a cage on the monster's head, and it does mostly go off without a hitch. And I do recommend watching the actual cartoon. It's on Netflix, by the way, so just go watch it there. But this sequence is actually really fun. Is actually really funny, and there is one sequence where an anvil is actually part of the trap and narrowly misses hitting the slime monster. But eventually it does wind up dropping the trap on Mystery Inc. So yeah, for whatever reason, I think Fred's calculations were off, but they were standing in the wrong spot for the monster to actually get trapped in it, and long story short, Mr. Inc. got trapped in the cage instead, and all but Daphne winds up being free from the cage, and the slime monster takes full advantage of this. It proceeds to incapacitate the rest of the group with its slime to keep them from escaping the cage faster. And then proceeds to chase Daphne out of the cave and through the rest of the facility, where she's actually trying to run from it in the ice cream shop, but eventually it does wind up cornering her and does throw slime on her legs so she can't run away from it. But it's at this point where Fred and the rest of the group actually escape by eating themselves out, because it's Frostmire's. It's frozen dessert. It's not really dangerous to them, and they are immediately able to actually escape from it. At which point they grab the hose from the soft serve machine and glue the monster to the wall. At which point Sheriff Stone and Fred's father actually walk in and are annoyed about why their newest tourist trap is actually stuck to the wall of the Frostmire's frozen treat stand. But they merely tell them their theory about how Franklin Frostmire is actually planning to rob the bank, and that they caught him in the act. But then they actually remark a twist to the mystery, which is that Franklin Frostmire was the one who called them. Yeah, as it turns out, Frostmire was indeed the guy who showed up. He wound up showing up, and he wound up finding out that something was going on in his shop and immediately called the cops. So yeah, that's why Sheriff Stone and Fred Sr. are there. They got a call and immediately came to investigate because of something Franklin Frostmire said to them. Which then throws the rest of the gang for the loop, and they realize they actually don't know who's under the costume anymore, so they decide to unmask the slime monster to discover Professor Emmanuel Ruffalo, who is revealed to have been the slime monster the whole time. And then he proceeds to actually explain his plan to them, which is that he actually did wind up faking his own capture so that he could pretend to be the slime monster and also kind of conduct his business uninhibited. But yeah, long story short, he just kind of he wound up just finding the tunnels which he knew led onto the bank, and he did this while actually collecting mold samples for a science class, and eventually realizing he can actually break into the bank that way, and realizing Frostmire's provided the perfect location for him to actually break in and do what he needed to, decided to set everything up so that it looked like Franklin Frostmire was conducting the whole crime. And later, when Mystery Inc. was actually began investigating him, he used a slingshot in his closet and covered himself in Frostmire to actually fake his own cocooning. So. Yeah, that's how we wound up being stuck to the ceiling. But in any case, but the one thing that Mystery Inc. can't actually figure out is why he would actually steal from the bank, with Daphne merely pointing out that he's a school teacher and that he would have no reason. But then they realize they answer their own question because being a school teacher actually pays peanuts. So yeah, that's why. So that's his entire motivation for actually breaking into the bank. He's a school teacher. He doesn't get paid shit. Yeah, that's often a recurring bit. I don't know how true it is because I'm not a teacher, but supposedly teachers don't make all that much. A teacher's salary isn't worth very much, and they don't make a whole lot. So in any case, they wound up being with that mystery solved, Ruffalo was actually arrested and hauled off to the station. But Daphne decides to actually ask him one last thing, which is that she actually found the locket and wonders how that actually fits into his plan, with Ruffalo actually just being a little bit annoyed and pointing out that he actually doesn't know anything about it, and tells her to stop asking him pointless questions. At which point he's then hauled off to the station and arrested. So yeah, that mystery winds up being solved, and the Mystery Inc. gang are still a little bit confused as to how the locket plays in, but decide to actually celebrate by actually heading to Angel Dynamite's studio to actually help her host. While they actually discuss things over. At which point, Shaggy picks up a call for Angel Dynamite to actually help her run the show and actually pick up a request. And what they actually find is a man who proceeds to call himself Mr. E, which is just a really clever pun. But yeah, Mr. E then proceeds to tell them that they actually weren't supposed to find that locket, and that in doing so they actually uncovered a mystery that they weren't supposed to uncover, or let alone solve. So, and with that, that's where the episode ends. So yeah, this episode is very interesting in that it sets out that the series is actually going to have a series of day-to-day mysteries like it normally does, but this one actually has an overarching mystery as well. So yeah, I'm interested to see how that locket actually is going to play into the final mystery of this whole thing. But yeah, it is interesting that this mystery is not only going to solve more stuff, but is actually not only going to be a bit more of a mature reboot of the series, which I actually never seen this, and I'm glad I'm watching it now. But yeah, it is a little bit interesting that this is indeed a thing. But yeah, I'm interested to see how this overarching mystery is going to play out. I've never actually seen the original series, so I don't know. But I've seen an episode here or there, but I've never actually sat down and actually watched it. So yeah, I don't know. It'll definitely be interesting going through and actually breaking that down for you guys. But for right now, thank you guys so much for watching this review. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter in the description below. Be sure to check out my Patreon in the description below as well if you want to help support the show. It does really help me out, so I definitely would appreciate it if you actually went and did that. Also, be sure to actually go and check out my Twitch down in the description. I stream every Sunday at 2:30 Eastern Standard Time. So if you guys absolutely want to see that, by all means, again, link is down in the description. Just be sure to go check that out. And finally, if you want to see more content from me, then be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen. The top video is the most recent video. It may or may not be this one. Whereas the bottom video is a video recommended to you based on what you've already seen from me. So if you want to try something new or see more of what you like, then be sure to check both of those videos out. But regardless of whether or not to do any of those things, thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace!